They say 40 years in you finally know the person you married, but for me, it was like slowly meeting a stranger after all that time. 40 years. Imagine 4 decades next to a man who locked his secrets away, always checking his watch, always rushing to the next gate. My husband, Jack Sterling, had been a pilot since day one, a man constantly in motion. For years, I was okay with his life in the clouds. I knew he loved me in his own way, accepted the quiet between us, the soft sound of his steps late at night, the click of the door as he left for another trip. He was the adventurer, and I was his home base. Our marriage had this strange balance until the night he blew it all up. It was a quiet dinner, one of those rare nights he was actually home. Wine was flowing, and his eyes stayed on mine a beat too long. He leaned over the table, gave me the smile that didn't reach his eyes, and dropped his bomb. Think of it as an arrangement, he said, his voice low and steady. They'll be here for you when I can't. Two men, Mark, all polished charm, and David, quiet and smart. His friends, he told me, guys he trusted. He wanted me to trust them too, welcome them into my life in ways I couldn't even picture, let them give me company he couldn't anymore. At first, it was unbelievable, like a joke whispered too loud that hung in the air even after the wine was gone and the lights were low. But I couldn't shake it off, or the little spark of curiosity that started to burn, the idea of finding myself again, in ways I'd given up on years ago. Jack was gone so much anyway, maybe this was his weird gift, or a test, or something else entirely. That night, a quiet curiosity turned into something bolder, though I didn't know it then. It was the start of a path that would mess up my marriage, my life, everything I thought I knew. They say after 40 years you truly get your spouse, but it was more like finding a stranger. The man across from me, who I'd shared my life with for 40 years, reached for the wine, refilling my glass with a calm hand. His eyes met mine like he was weighing something he'd been thinking about for ages. Sarah, he said, and his voice had a different tone, softer than usual. There's something I've been thinking about, a way to make things easier for us. This was Jack Sterling, my husband, a man of few words and a life full of being away. A pilot forever, Jack was always on the move, his life a blur of schedules, flights, and faraway places. I was used to our marriage being a waiting game. I was the constant, holding down the fort while he was out there. It worked for us, or so I thought. But tonight, Jack had this intensity that made me uneasy, a feeling I didn't see coming. Go on, I said, curiosity hiding the tremor in my voice. He leaned back, studying me like he was checking if I could handle what he was about to say. You know how much I'm gone. I hate thinking of you here alone so much, he started, his voice careful, too careful. I was thinking, maybe it's time you had someone else around, someone to look out for you when I can't. I frowned, his words not making sense. You're suggesting what exactly? A partnership of sorts. I have two friends who they could be here when I'm not, he said with a careful smile. Think of it as an arrangement. The words took a second to sink in. This was my husband's idea, to share his role in my life, let someone else into our carefully built world. He'd mentioned these friends before, two guys I'd never met, but their names sounded familiar, Mark and David. Mark was some kind of art dealer, the kind Jack said could sell ice to Eskimos. David was a professor, serious and thoughtful, or so Jack said. I didn't know much else, just that they were men he trusted, men who knew him way before me. As he sat there looking at me with a mix of hope and something else I couldn't place, part of me wanted to laugh, call it a weird joke, but I didn't. Instead, I felt this odd thrill, a dark curiosity I didn't know I had. You mean they'd be here for me? I asked, my voice shaky with disbelief and interest. Yes, he replied, leaning in, his voice dropping to a whisper. They'll take care of you, Sarah. I trust them. They're good men. Is that what you want? I asked, barely recognizing my own words. He took my hand across the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles. I want you to be happy, Sarah, and I know I haven't been around much to give you that. A sense of unreality filled the air, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. I'd been a social worker for most of my life, a woman who listened to everyone else's problems and gave advice. I was always practical, the steady one. But here I was, hearing a proposal that sounded more like a trashy novel than real life. Still, under the shock, I felt something stirring. The idea of new company, of getting attention I hadn't felt in years, was strangely exciting. Was this really Jack's idea of love? Or maybe, I wondered, was he giving me permission to find parts of myself I'd buried long ago? There was only one way to find out. And so, I nodded. The next week dragged by with a quiet tension, like the house was holding its breath. I spent hours replaying that dinner, wondering if I dreamed it, if Jack would come back from his next trip and laugh it off. But he didn't. He was serious. That was clear. And soon enough, I'd meet Mark and David. Mark was first. Jack was away, of course, and I'd spent the day making the house look welcoming. As the clock ticked towards 7, the doorbell rang. My heart raced, hands shaking as I opened the door to a tall, broad-shouldered man with a bouquet of lilies and a smile that felt like it was practiced in a mirror. "Mark?" I said, the name feeling strange on my tongue. "Sarah," he replied, handing me the flowers. His voice was deep and smooth, his manner charming in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. We went into the living room, where he settled on the couch like he'd been there 100 times. He talked with easy charm, telling stories about his art dealing, name-dropping auctions in Paris, and big-shot clients. He made me feel like I was part of some bigger, more exciting world, one I'd only seen in movies. He laughed easily, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and before I knew it, I was laughing too. When he left that night, he gave me a lingering look, his hand brushing mine. "I'll see you again, Sarah," he said, his voice both a promise and an invitation. The next week, it was David's turn. Where Mark was bold and easy, David was quieter, his presence less obvious, but somehow more intense. He was a listener, leaning in when I spoke, his eyes thoughtful, like every word mattered. He wore glasses that made him look intellectual, and his clothes were simple, unassuming. His smile, when it came, was small but genuine. We talked about books, life, love, even touched on philosophy. He had a way of making me feel seen, of speaking with a gentleness that put me at ease. I found myself telling him things I'd hidden away, old dreams, small regrets. He listened without judgment, nodding thoughtfully, like he was absorbing every part of me. When he finally stood to leave, he gave a small bow, a subtle gesture of respect that felt as intimate as a touch. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Sarah," he said softly, his words hanging in the air long after he closed the door. The weeks went by in a quiet rhythm. Jack was gone more, leaving the house to me, Mark, and David. Each man brought something different to my life. Mark was light, someone who could make the world brighter. He'd show up with a grin and some new story, pulling me out of my routine, making me feel young again. David, on the other hand, offered a kind of steadiness, a quiet calm that grounded me. His presence was a balm, a comforting contrast to Mark's bright energy. It was strange, I thought, how I'd come to depend on these two men. I'd always been independent, proud of the life I'd built, the home I'd kept. But now, for the first time in years, I felt a fullness, a sense of completion I hadn't expected. Yet with that contentment came a new restlessness. I wondered if Jack knew what he'd started, or if he'd just acted on a whim, never really thinking I'd go along with it. The thought made me both resentful and amused. How could he have known his plan would bring me a kind of freedom I hadn't dared to look for? Still, a part of me clung to the question that hid beneath every visit from Mark and David. What did they really want from me? But those questions could wait. For now, I'd enjoy these moments, letting myself savor this new, unexpected chapter, even as I felt something dark and unknown starting to unfold in the back of my mind. Days turned into weeks, and I got used to Mark and David's visits, each filling a different space in my life. Jack was away even more, his work stretching across continents and time zones, leaving me alone in our apartment for weeks. I often wondered what he pictured back home, or if he even thought about it at all. One evening, getting ready for Mark's visit, I found myself in front of my closet, looking at dresses I hadn't worn in years. It was silly, I told myself, feeling a thrill of nervous excitement. But the truth was, Mark was handsome and charming, and he made me feel lighter, like the world and all its problems were somehow manageable. That night, I picked a blue dress, one I loved back in my younger days. When he arrived, I saw the approval in his eyes, the way he looked at me a little longer than usual. "Lovely as ever," he said, leaning in with a smirk. He always had that playful edge, a flirtation I couldn't quite ignore. We spent the evening talking, sipping wine as he told stories of his art deals in Europe. Mark could make anything sound grand, a practiced charm that made me feel like I was part of something bigger than my quiet life. As he talked, my curiosity grew. What did he see in me? What kind of man takes on this strange role Jack had set up? "Mark," I started, putting down my glass, "why did you agree to this arrangement?" He looked at me, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "What's not to like, Sarah? A beautiful woman, interesting company. I'd say I got the better end of the deal." "Is that all it is?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Jack never told me what he offered you." Mark's smile slipped for a second, a shadow crossing his face. Jack offered me friendship, Sarah, and trust, he replied smoothly. I don't take that lightly. His words should have reassured me, but they just made me more unsure. A flicker of something unspoken stayed in his eyes, something dark and unreadable. But before I could ask more, he changed the subject, asking about my past, my years as a social worker, the life I'd lived before Jack. And just like that, the moment passed, my questions lost in his easy charm. A week later, it was David's turn. Unlike Mark's bold energy, David brought a calm that was almost unsettling. He listened like every word I said had weight, a rare gift that made me feel exposed in a way that was both unnerving and exciting. That evening, as we sat in my small library, I saw him looking at the shelves, his eyes on the rows of books I'd collected over the years. You have a wonderful collection, he said, taking down a worn Russian novel. So many people forget the classics. I smiled, glad he noticed. I guess I like holding on to the past. He looked at me thoughtfully, setting the book down. Holding on to the past can be comforting, he said, but it can also be a cage. There was weight to his words, a subtle thought that made me uneasy. It was moments like these when David's calm face seemed to hide something deeper, something unspoken. He was a professor, after all, a man of thought, but there was an edge to him, a quiet intensity I didn't get yet. Do you ever wonder, Sarah, he asked suddenly, what your life would have been like if you'd made different choices? If you hadn't married Jack, for example? The question caught me off guard, stirring a feeling I couldn't place. I guess everyone wonders that, I replied carefully, but we make the best of what we have, right? He nodded, his eyes meeting mine with a softness that made me feel open. It's just that you seem like someone who has depths, he murmured. I wonder if you've ever really found them. There it was again, that quiet challenge, the feeling that he saw something in me even I didn't know. His words stayed with me long after he left, a quiet whisper in my mind. The weeks turned into months, and seeing Mark and David became routine, a strange new normal I hadn't planned for. But there was something underneath, a growing unease that gnawed at me. It was small at first, a glance that lasted too long, a conversation that hinted at secrets I wasn't in on. One evening, when Jack was away on another long trip, I decided to clean out his office. He always kept it neat, but there were drawers he never touched, papers scattered on his desk. Going through his things, I found a small locked drawer I'd never seen before. My heart quickened as I found a spare key in his desk organizer. A sudden urge of curiosity pushed me forward. Inside, I found a letter, folded and worn, like it had been read many times. The handwriting was Jack's, but the words were strange, unclear, like they were coded. The letter mentioned Mark and David by name, along with words I didn't understand. The plan is set, it read. Our arrangement solid. Trust is key, do not fail me. A chill ran down my spine reading those words. My husband's plan took on a new, unsettling meaning. This wasn't just a casual arrangement. There was something more going on, something beyond just company, something darker, hidden. The words played in my mind that night, twisting into my dreams, casting shadows on my thoughts. The next morning, getting ready for Mark's visit, I looked at him with a new wariness, a question I didn't dare to ask hanging between us. As days went by, I felt stuck in a strange place, between trust and doubt. Mark and David kept coming, each with their charm, their unspoken promises. But I couldn't ignore the dark looks, the quiet tension that ran under their words. Mark's charm, once comforting, a break from my quiet life, now seemed like a mask, a carefully made show hiding something sharper, colder. And David, with his quiet intensity, seemed less like a friend and more like a mystery, a man whose reasons I couldn't read anymore. I started to test things, dropping hints, looking for answers. I mentioned the letter once, just in passing, watching their reactions. Mark laughed it off, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a flash of knowing, maybe fear. David's reaction was quieter, a slight stiffening, a tension that told me he knew more than he said. One evening, after a particularly intense talk, I decided to face Mark directly. We were in the living room, the fire casting shadows on his face, his eyes bright in the dim light. Mark, I started carefully, what do you really know about Jack's arrangement? He looked at me, his eyes steady but cautious. For a second, he seemed like he'd deny it, brush off my question as paranoia. But something in my face must have stopped him because he sighed, setting down his glass quietly. Sarah, he said, his voice softer than usual, Jack's a complicated man, and this arrangement, it's not as simple as you think. Then explain it to me, I demanded, my heart pounding. He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the door like checking if we were alone. Jack and I, we go way back. He saved me once years ago, got me out of a mess I couldn't handle. I owe him. And when he asked me to be here for you, to take care of you, I agreed. But there's more to it, Sarah. Jack's not as innocent as he seems. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Jack has debts, a lot of them. He needed a way to fix his money problems, and he thought you might be the answer. The words hit me hard, the truth crashing down on me. I'd been a pawn, a piece in some twisted game, my own life used as payment for Jack's debts. And Mark and David, they were his helpers, his agents in this whole thing. How long have you known? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Since the start, he admitted, his eyes dropping to the floor. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, Sarah. I didn't expect to care about you. The confession hung between us, a fragile, painful truth neither of us could deny. I felt a wave of betrayal, anger, and sadness all mixed together. The man I'd loved, the life I'd built, it had all been a lie, a carefully made show to keep me blind. I stood up, the room spinning around me, the weight of Mark's words heavy on my chest. I need you to leave, I whispered, my voice shaking with barely held back rage. He looked at me, regret in his eyes, but he didn't argue. He just nodded, grabbing his coat and walking out, leaving me alone with the broken pieces of my life. The next morning, dawn was cold and gray, the chill seeping through the walls as I sat alone in the quiet apartment. Mark's words weighed on me, filling me with anger and disbelief. My husband Jack, the man I'd trusted for decades, had used our life like money, making me a pawn in his money games. But Mark's last words kept coming back. I didn't expect to care about you. It was almost funny, the idea that in the middle of this scheme, he could suddenly have real feelings. Did he really think I'd believe that? Or worse, did I want to believe it? The thought made me sick, but a part of me still held on to the idea that maybe, in all this lying, there was a little bit of truth. But that part was quickly silenced by a burning anger that threatened to take over me. Today was David's turn. Getting ready for his visit, I felt a strange calm come over me, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. If anyone could give me answers, it would be David, the steady, thoughtful professor who seemed to see everything. And if he'd betrayed me too, well, I was ready for whatever truth he had to give. When the doorbell rang, I opened it with steady hands, letting him in without a word. He looked at my face, his own calm as he took off his coat. "Sarah," he greeted, his voice gentle. "You look troubled. Is something wrong?" "Sit," I replied shortly, pointing to the couch. He raised an eyebrow, but sat down across from me. I could see a flicker of unease in his eyes, a hint that he knew what was coming. For a moment, we sat in silence, the tension building. Then I met his eyes, letting my anger show, giving him a taste of the storm inside me. "David," I started, my voice calm but cold, "I want you to be honest with me about everything." He shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. "Honest about what exactly?" "About Jack," I replied. "About this arrangement and your part in it." His face didn't change, but I saw his fingers clench, his calm breaking for just a second. "What has Mark told you?" he asked, his voice controlled. "Enough," I said sharply. "He told me about Jack's debts, about how this whole thing was a way for Jack to get out of it, using me." David's shoulders dropped, a look of defeat crossing his face. "I guess it was only a matter of time before you found out." "So it's true?" I pressed, anger rising. "You've both been in on this from the start?" "Yes," he admitted quietly, his eyes falling to the floor. "Jack, he was desperate, Sarah. He had debts he couldn't get out of, and he thought he could use this as a way out." "And you went along with it?" I asked, my voice shaking with betrayal. "You of all people, David, the wise professor, the man who listens and understands." He looked up, his eyes filled with a sadness that felt almost real. "I didn't want to, Sarah. I told him from the start it was wrong. But he's my oldest friend, and he made it sound like you'd be taken care of, that it would be mutual." "Mutual?" I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and sharp. "You think this has been mutual? You and Mark have been here playing roles, pretending to care for what? For some promise from Jack?" His face fell, guilt shadowing his features. "It wasn't just a promise, Sarah. It was a way for us to help him and, well, after a while it became more than that." "More than that?" I repeated, the bitterness in my voice clear. "Don't try to tell me you had a change of heart, David. I'm not a fool." He sighed, his gaze softening. I know you're angry, Sarah, and you have every right to be. But please understand that my feelings, at least, were real. Real? I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. You call this real? But he didn't answer. Instead, he looked away, his jaw tightening, his silence saying more than words. And in that silence, I felt the full weight of my betrayal, the realization that the life I'd known was nothing but a lie. I stood, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. I want you to leave, David. Now. He looked up, a flash of pain in his eyes. Sarah, please, let me explain. But I shook my head, my voice a cold whisper. There's nothing left to explain. Just go. Without another word, he stood, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. But just before he left, he turned back, his eyes lingering on me with a sadness that almost felt real. Sarah, he said quietly, I'm sorry. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the empty silence of the apartment. The apartment felt different after that. Quieter, emptier, like the walls themselves had soaked up my anger, my betrayal. For days, I wandered through the rooms, my mind racing with thoughts, questions, and plans. I couldn't just sit here waiting for Jack or his friends to decide my life for me. No, this time I'd take control. I spent the next few days going through Jack's office, looking for anything that could help me, anything to turn things around. Finally, I found it, a hidden file tucked away in his desk drawer. Records of his debts, his investments, letters from creditors demanding money, and in the middle of it, a contract with my name, forged, giving Jack control of a big chunk of our money. A sickening feeling washed over me. Jack had planned this all out, carefully using me as his safety net. He'd betrayed me in every way, using my trust to secure his future. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated me. I spent the next days planning my next move, meeting with lawyers, making sure my own money was safe, getting ready for the fight. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that Jack would fight back, but I was ready. I'd face him, show his lies, and take back my life. The night Jack came back, I was waiting for him. He walked in, confident as usual, but stopped short when he saw me standing there, my face set, the papers in my hand. Sarah? He greeted, surprised. You're here. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. I think we need to talk. He frowned, glancing at the papers, his face darkening. What's this? This, I said, holding up the file, is proof of your betrayal, Jack. The debts, the forged signatures, the arrangement with Mark and David. His face paled, panic flashing in his eyes before he hit it. Sarah, you're overreacting. It's not what you think. Not what I think? I laughed, the sound cold. You used me, Jack. You lied to me, played me, all to save yourself. You never cared about me, you just wanted my money. Sarah, please, he said, stepping towards me, hands reaching out. I was desperate. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Save it, I replied, stepping back. I trusted you, Jack. I loved you. And this is how you pay me back. He looked away, his jaw clenched, frustration clear. You don't understand, Sarah, he said, his voice tight. It's not as simple as you think. Isn't it? I shot back, my voice hard. You forged my signature, Jack. You dragged my name into your debts. You lied to me about this whole arrangement with Mark and David. How could any of that be complicated? He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm down. I did what I had to do, he said finally. I didn't want you to find out like this, but yes, Sarah, I needed a way out. And we both know the life we had, it wasn't working. Not for either of us. I felt a pang of disbelief. So you admit it? This was all a plan to save yourself? You threw away everything we had, everything I believed in. For what? Money? Jack's face softened, and he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a pleading tone. Sarah, listen. I didn't want to hurt you, but we haven't been happy for years. I thought if I could fix things with money, it would be a way to start over, to make things right. To make things right? I let out a hollow laugh. So your idea of fixing our marriage was to play me, to turn our life into a business deal? His face hardened, the softness gone. Don't make it sound so small. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Sarah. I thought that if Mark and David were here, you'd be less lonely. I thought you might even be grateful for the attention. Grateful? I repeated, my voice rising. You think I would be grateful for being betrayed by the man I loved? You wanted change, Sarah, he said harshly, his voice rising too. You think I didn't notice how restless you'd become? I offered you freedom, a way to live the life you wanted, without our old marriage holding you back. I thought you'd appreciate that. I stood there, staring at him, my anger turning colder, sharper. You thought I'd appreciate you selling off my life to pay for your mistakes? Jack met my gaze, steady, unyielding. The tension between us was tight. "I thought we could start fresh," he said softly, "but maybe I was wrong." "No, Jack," I replied, my voice like ice. "You didn't think at all, or maybe you did, and that's what makes this unforgivable." And I saw the frustration building in him, his face darkening as he fought to stay calm. And in that moment, I realized Jack wasn't just a man who'd made a mistake. He was someone who saw everything, everyone, as pieces in a game he thought he could control. And for years, I'd been his most obedient piece. Not anymore. As Jack stormed off to his office, slamming the door, I felt the silence fall over me. Anger and betrayal churned inside, but I couldn't let it take over. I had to stay focused, keep my mind clear. This wasn't over yet. Over the next few days, I barely saw Jack, each of us living in separate parts of the apartment, like strangers. But I didn't mind. It gave me time to get ready. Mark and David were coming back later that week, and I knew this was my chance to get the answers I needed, to know everything about their part in this. If they thought they could lie to me anymore, they were wrong. Mark came first, his usual charm gone, replaced by a careful watchfulness. He came into the apartment like he expected a trap, his eyes checking my face, seeing the storm under my calm. "Sarah," he greeted, his voice softer than usual. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me." "Sit down, Mark," I replied shortly, pointing to the living room. "We need to talk." He did, sitting on the couch, tense, waiting for me to start. I sat across from him, my eyes steady. "Tell me everything, I said, my voice firm. "No more half-truths, no more excuses. I want the whole story." He hesitated, his fingers moving restlessly, avoiding my eyes. "Sarah, I've already told you most of it. Jack needed a way out, and he thought if I was here for you, it would make things easier." "Easier for who?" I asked sharply. "Because it sure hasn't been easier for me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what you want me to say. Yes, I agreed to help him, but I never meant for it to go this far." I leaned forward, my voice cold. "Then why did you? Why go along with a plan that was so clearly wrong?" Mark looked away, his face full of regret. Jack was desperate, and I owed him. There was a time he helped me out of a bad situation. This was my way of paying him back. "By lying to me?" I demanded, my voice rising. "By pretending to care, all for some debt?" "I do care, Sarah," he replied quietly, his eyes finally meeting mine. "I didn't expect to, but I do. You've become important to me, more than I ever thought possible." His words hung in the air, a fragile confession that sounded empty. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let his words soothe the ache in my heart, but I couldn't forget the lies, the betrayal that built everything between us. "You're saying that now," I said, my voice steady, "but you've been lying to me from the start. How am I supposed to trust anything you say?" Mark looked away, pain crossing his face. "I don't know. Maybe you can't, but I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything." I held his gaze, the silence between us heavy with unspoken truths. But before I could answer, the doorbell rang, breaking the tension. David. I stood, leaving Mark in the living room, going to answer the door. David stood on the porch, his face unreadable, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of caution and curiosity. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. As he walked past, I felt a strange sense of finality, like the pieces were finally falling into place. I led him into the living room where he stopped, his eyes landing on Mark. The tension between them was instant, a charged silence. Mark looked away, jaw tight, while David's face stayed calm, his eyes shifting to me. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice calm. "We're going to have a little talk," I replied, sitting down again. "The three of us. It's time for the truth to come out, don't you think?" David's face didn't change, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes, a sign he understood. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft. "I don't think—" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice firm. "No more excuses, no more avoiding. I want to know everything. Why you agreed to this arrangement, what you were promised, and what you really think of me." David hesitated, glancing at Mark before finally meeting my gaze. "I agreed because Jack asked me to. He needed help, and I thought maybe somehow it could work, that maybe you'd find happiness in this too." "Happiness?" I repeated in disbelief. "Do you really believe that this was about my happiness?" David looked away, his face troubled. I don't know what to believe anymore. But I do know that I came to care for you, Sarah. Maybe not in the way Jack planned, but it became real for me." I stared at him, my anger softening, replaced by a hollow disappointment. It was the same story, the same empty confession. Both of them had fallen into Jack's plan, each with their own reasons, their own versions of the truth. And in the end, I was left with the broken pieces, the empty promises. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How you've broken every bit of trust I had." They both looked at me, regret in their faces, but it wasn't enough. Regret couldn't undo the damage, couldn't rebuild the trust that was gone. I stood, my hands shaking as I held onto the chair. "I want both of you to leave now." They hesitated, exchanging a look, but they knew there was nothing left to say. Slowly, they stood, each heading to the door without another word. I watched them go, my heart heavy, the silence in the apartment closing in on me. As the door closed behind them, I stood alone in the empty room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. My life, my marriage, my safety, all torn apart, leaving me with nothing but questions and the bitter taste of loss. The next morning, the emptiness of the apartment felt overwhelming, the silence filled with the echoes of their voices, the broken promises. But as I stood there looking out at the gray city, a strange clarity began to settle in. Jack's betrayal, Mark and David's lies, they'd stripped away the illusions I'd held onto for so long. I'd lived years in the shadow of a marriage that was never real, a life built on compromises and lies. But now, in the ruins, I saw a way forward, a path to rebuild, to take back my own life. It wouldn't be easy, and the pain would stay, but I was ready. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope, a strength I hadn't known I had. I'd been tricked, betrayed, but I wasn't broken. I would rise, stronger, wiser, and free. I spent the next few days in a blur, my mind racing with plans, each step carefully thought out. For too long, I'd been passive, watching my own life, letting Jack and his friends decide my path. But those days were over. One morning, I went downtown to a small law office I'd found a few weeks before. I wanted a lawyer who wasn't connected to Jack's world. After explaining everything, I left with a list of papers to get, steps to take to protect my money and cut Jack off. Back home, I went to Jack's office with a new purpose. He wasn't due back for days, and I had to act fast. I searched every drawer, every hidden place, looking for anything that could help me. Finally, after hours, I found it. Another file with more money records and strange transactions that showed Jack had been taking money from accounts I didn't even know existed. My heart raced as I held the file, each paper a piece of Jack's lies. This was my proof of his betrayal, not just emotionally, but financially. I put the papers in my bag, feeling a rush of adrenaline that was both exciting and scary. For the first time, I had the upper hand. The next morning, I called Jack's number, my fingers shaking a little. He answered on the second ring, his voice smooth, casual, like it was any normal day. "Sarah?" he greeted, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you to call." "We need to talk," I replied, my voice steady. He hesitated, and I could almost hear him thinking, wondering why I was calling. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I know everything, Jack. The debts, the forged signatures, the deals with Mark and David. I found the records, the hidden accounts. I know all of it." Silence for a beat, then he let out a slow breath. "Sarah," he started, his voice soft, almost like he was talking to a child. "You're overreacting. It's not as bad as it seems." "Don't lie to me, Jack," I said, my voice sharp. "I have the papers right here. You've been lying to me for years, and I'm done letting you control my life." "Sarah, listen," he said, his voice changing, trying to sound calm. "I did what I had to do. We both know the life we had wasn't working. I thought I was helping you, giving you a chance to live a better life." "A better life?" I laughed, the sound bitter. "You call this a better life? You used me, Jack. You lied to me, played me, all to pay for your mistakes." "Fine," he replied, his voice hardening. "Believe what you want, but you're not going to just walk away from this, Sarah. You're in this too. Those accounts are in your name too, and if you think you can just leave, you're wrong." I felt anger rise, but I stayed calm. "Don't underestimate me, Jack. I have all the proof I need, and if you think you can scare me, you're wrong." He went silent, and I could feel the tension on the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold. "You're making a mistake, Sarah. You're going to regret this." "Goodbye, Jack," I said, hanging up before he could say more. Hanging up, I felt a strange relief, like a weight had lifted. For the first time in years, I was free. With Jack's threats in my mind, I knew I had to move fast. I spent the next days moving my money to a new account, one Jack couldn't touch. I changed the locks, got a security system, made sure everything I owned was safe. I also called the lawyer, explaining everything, showing him the papers I'd found. He said I had a strong case, that Jack's actions were grounds for separation, even charges if I wanted to. But I didn't want a long legal fight. I wanted my freedom, my own life, and Jack out of it for good. So I chose a simpler way, a separation agreement that would cut our money ties and make sure he couldn't get to my assets anymore. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that Jack would fight, but I was ready. For the first time in years, I felt strong, able, and unafraid. A week later, Jack came home, his face dark as he came into the apartment. He looked around, seeing the new locks, the changes I'd made, his eyes hardening when he realized I'd taken control. "Sarah," he greeted, his voice cold. "What is this?" "This," I replied, holding up the separation agreement, "is the end of whatever was left of our marriage." He scoffed, crossing his arms, looking at me with anger. "You really think you can just walk away?" "Yes," I replied calmly, putting the papers on the table between us. "I'm done, Jack. I've signed everything. All you need to do is sign, and we can finally go our own ways." He glanced at the papers, a sneer twisting his lips. "And what makes you think I'll sign this?" "Because if you don't," I said, my voice steady, "I'll take the papers I found to the police. I'll show everything you've done, and I won't stop there." For a moment, he just stared at me, anger and disbelief in his eyes. But slowly he understood, and I saw the fight leave him, his shoulders slumping as he sighed, defeated. "Fine," he said, reaching for the pen. "If this is what you want." He signed the papers, his name a bitter scrawl at the bottom. When he was done, he set the pen down, looking up at me, cold. "Congratulations, Sarah," he said. "You've won." And I took the papers, my heart pounding, feeling the finality of it, the weight of our marriage gone, just ink on paper. But I felt no sadness, only freedom, a new strength. "Goodbye, Jack," I said, my voice steady. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the empty apartment. In the weeks that followed, I slowly rebuilt my life. I sold the apartment, moved to a smaller place downtown, and started to find myself again. I picked up old hobbies, reached out to friends I hadn't seen in years, and found a new sense of independence. I didn't hear much from Jack after the separation. A few angry emails, but I ignored them, letting his words fade away. Mark and David stayed away, their roles in my life gone. I thought about them sometimes, wondering if anything they'd said was real, or just part of Jack's game. But in the end, it didn't matter. I was free of all of them, free to live my life my way. One day, sitting in my new place, drinking coffee, watching the city wake up, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I was alone, but I was whole, complete in a way I hadn't been before. I'd faced betrayal, heartbreak, lies, but I'd come out stronger, wiser, and free.